They say they found what appeared to be a human-made tunnel dug into the ground with a fully functioning shelter inside, which was 6 feet in height and over 10 feet in diameter.
There's a door in the side of a hill outside a city in the American Southwest. And unless you knew exactly where to look, you would walk past it 100 times. Plywood, painted the color of dirt, hinged into a slope of scrub brush and loose gravel. Behind it, a room. A real one. A bed frame, shelving, a ventilation pipe running 12 feet up through packed earth to the surface, hidden inside a dead shrub. A homeless man built it by hand at night with no permit, no crew, and almost no power tools. It took him the better part of a year. And when the county finally found it, they didn't know whether to arrest him or hire him. To understand why a man with nothing would spend a year digging a hole in the ground, you have to understand what the alternative looked like.
Calgary police have released more information on an underground encampment found near Stampede Park and Earlton Stampede Station.
He'd been sleeping outside for close to 3 years by the time he started digging. Not in a shelter. Shelters have curfews, waiting lists, and rules about pets and partners that push a lot of people back onto the street within days. He tried a tent first, the way almost everyone sleeping rough starts out. A tent is fast and it's free, but a tent is also a target. Slit it open with a pocket knife and everything you own is gone in 10 seconds. Rain gets in. Wind takes the whole structure down, and in a lot of cities, camping in public is itself the crime. Which means the tent isn't just vulnerable to thieves, it's vulnerable to the city sweeping the block and throwing away whatever's left. So he started looking for something a tent could never give him. Cover. Not shade, not shelter from wind. Actual cover. The kind that hides you completely from the people who might hurt you and the people who might cite you for existing where you are. That's the detail people usually guess wrong on their first watch. They assume he was hiding from the cold. Mostly, he was hiding from other people. Before any of that, he was a man with a job and a lease, until a layoff and a medical bill collapsed both inside the same 6 months. That order matters. The story people tell themselves about homelessness usually starts with a bad decision. His started with 2 pieces of paper arriving in the same week, a termination notice and a hospital invoice, and neither one caring what the other had just done to him. Within a year, he'd cycled through a cousin's couch, his car, and finally the sidewalk, which is the order it goes for a lot of people whose homelessness isn't visible until it's the only option left. He found the spot the way a lot of long-term, unsheltered people find their spots, by walking the same stretch of undeveloped land for weeks, until he understood its rhythms. Who passed by and when, where the ground held water after rain, and where it drained. He picked a slope on land nobody was actively using, tucked behind brush thick enough to block sight lines from the nearest road. Digging into flat ground gets you flooded the first storm that hits. Digging into a hillside, angled slightly downward from the entrance, means water runs out instead of in. That single decision, made before he'd moved a single shovel of dirt, is the reason the room survived its first winter. He started with a hand trowel and a folding shovel, both scavenged. No jackhammer, no auger, nothing with a motor. In sandy soil that holds its shape without a wooden frame or steel supports, you can move a surprising amount of earth with hand tools and time. And time was the one resource he had in surplus. He dug at night mostly, because daylight digging on open land draws attention fast, and attention is the one thing that ends a project like this before it's finished. A few hours a session, fill a bucket, haul it out, scatter the loose dirt across a wide enough area that no single pile gave the operation away. The first real danger wasn't the county, it was the hole itself. Unsupported earth doesn't ask permission before it collapses. A tunnel with no bracing can come down on the person digging it, and there's no crew standing behind him to dig him back out if it does. He learned to read the soil the hard way, watching for cracks forming along the ceiling, keeping the roof of each new section low and thick rather than pushing for height too early. He salvaged wooden pallets from behind a hardware store and broke them down into planks to brace the ceiling in the sections he'd sleep under, wedging them tight against the packed dirt with whatever he could scavenge. It wasn't engineered, it was closer to guessed, tested and adjusted after the fact. But it held. Then came water. The first heavy rain after he'd cleared the main chamber sent a sheet of runoff straight down his entrance ramp. He woke to standing water and a bed frame sitting in mud. That single storm cost him nearly 2 weeks of work, and it forced the redesign that ended up saving the whole project. He dug a shallow channel along the outside of the entrance to divert runoff around the opening instead of into it, and he raised the sleeping platform on salvaged cinder blocks. After that, the room stayed dry through storms that flooded tents a quarter-mile away. Ventilation was the other problem nobody warns you about. A sealed hole in the ground doesn't just get stale, it gets dangerous, especially with any kind of open flame or fuel-burning stove inside it. He ran a length of scavenged PVC pipe from the ceiling of the main chamber up through the hillside and out the top, disguised inside a dead shrub he transplanted over the vent to hide the one detail that could give the whole thing away from above. Air moved. Smoke had somewhere to go.
People living in the middle of that. The city of Hollywood Park is trying to figure out how to clean out an underground homeless city just uncovered this week.
It sounds almost too clever for someone with no formal training and no money behind him. And that's exactly why it's worth sitting with. Necessity produces better engineering than people expect, because the cost of getting it wrong isn't a failed inspection, it's his life. Piece by piece, the space stopped being a hole and started being a home. A bed frame welded from scrap by a friend at a nearby encampment. Shelving built from stacked cinder blocks and plywood offcuts. A battery lantern for light, since running an extension cord to a hidden tunnel tends to draw exactly the kind of attention he'd spent months avoiding. He kept the footprint under 200 square feet, big enough for a bed, a sitting area and storage. Small enough that the excavated dirt never piled up anywhere obvious. But the thing that made it work wasn't any single fix. It was that every choice answered a specific threat he'd already survived on the street. The hidden door answered theft. The drainage channel answered the storm that nearly ended the project. The disguised vent answered the risk of being spotted from a road or a drone. Each fix down here is a scar from something that already happened to him up there, translated into dirt and scrap wood. Halfway through the build, he almost lost it for a completely different reason. A pair of hikers cutting off the marked trail wandered within 20 feet of the entrance one afternoon while he was sleeping inside with the door shut. He heard their voices through the packed dirt, close enough to make out words. And he lay still under the pallet, bracing for nearly an hour after they'd moved on, before he trusted the silence enough to breathe normally again. After that, he stopped digging on weekends entirely when foot traffic on the nearby trail doubled, and he started stacking loose brush across the approach to the door every time he left, so the path back to it would never wear itself visible in the dirt. A single afternoon like that taught him more about operational discipline than the rest of the build combined. He didn't get to keep it. Roughly a year in, a survey crew doing routine work on the parcel noticed the disturbed ground where he'd been scattering excavated dirt, then found the door. What happened next is the part that split public reaction when a local news crew picked up the story. Legally, the structure was an unpermitted excavation on land he didn't own, and the county was obligated to treat it that way, no matter how well it was built. He wasn't arrested. There was no code written for one man dug a room by hand and hurt nobody. So officials cited the land use violation, gave him a window to clear his belongings, and sealed the entrance. Some of the crew who inspected it before it closed for good told reporters the same thing, separately, without comparing notes. They'd walked into plenty of rough encampments over the years. This wasn't that. This was framed, drained, and vented better than some of the legal structures they'd cited that same month. None of that changed the outcome. A structure built without a permit on land you don't own gets closed whether it leaks or not. And treating this one differently would have meant writing a rule that doesn't exist anywhere in county code. That's the part of the story that doesn't resolve cleanly. The same ingenuity that made the room safe is also what made it, on paper, indistinguishable from any other illegal excavation. Skill built it. Policy closed it. Both of those things are true at once, and neither one cancels the other out. He's back above ground now, and by his own account, back to something closer to a tent. He told a local reporter he doesn't regret the year he spent digging, because for the first time since he lost his housing, he had a door that locked and nobody could see him through canvas at 3 in the morning. That's the whole case for the tunnel, stripped down to one sentence. Not comfort, not permanence, just a door nobody could cut through. Every fix in that hillside was a direct answer to a threat he'd already survived before he ever picked up a shovel. The drainage channel came from a flood that already happened. The hidden vent came from the fear of being spotted from above. None of it was theoretical. He built the safest version of the worst year of his life by hand in the dark, out of whatever the rest of the world had thrown away. So here's the question worth sitting with before you close this. If the choice was a tent that anyone could cut open in 10 seconds, or a year spent digging in the dark for one door that finally locked, which one would you have picked? Would you have picked?